You are grounded, Tyrell screamed, spit flying onto the glass desk as he slammed the $110 million city contract down in front of me. You do not leave this room. You do not eat. And you do not breathe until you sign the rights to the eco tower over to me. I looked past him to the kitchen. My father, Frank, was leaning against the $45,000 Italian marble island, laughing softly as he swirled a glass of my vintage Cabernet. Do as your brother says, Kiara, Dad called out, taking a sip. Don't be selfish. Tyrell snatched my phone from the desk and stormed out. The heavy biometric lock on the library door clicked shut with a final, metallic thud. I was 28 years old, the owner of this penthouse, and I was being held hostage in my own home. Please leave a comment letting me know which city you are following from. I really want to know who is listening to this story. The silence in the library was absolute, broken only by the hum of the climate control system. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. From up here, the city looked like a circuit board, logical and orderly. My life inside this penthouse, however, was a chaotic mess of bad debts and delusions. My family called this place the Walsh Estate. They walked on the heated floors and slept in the master suites, believing it was their birthright, a testament to the family legacy Frank and Ruth Walsh loved to brag about at the country club. But legally, this was not a home. It was a corporate showroom, registered to KW Designs, my architectural firm. The furniture they lounged on was inventory. The art on the walls was depreciating assets. They were not residents. They were occupants of a commercial display unit I had purchased 3 years ago. I let them live here because it was easier than explaining why the face of the company, my brother Tyrell, was sleeping on a futon in a studio apartment. The leather of my Aran chair creaked as I settled in, staring at the biometric lock on the door. It was funny, really. I had installed that lock to keep corporate espionage out. I never imagined it would be used to keep the CEO in. For 8 years, I had been the silent engine keeping the Walsh ship afloat. When Tyrell's first startup, a revolutionary dating app, crashed and burned, I paid off the $40,000 in server fees. When Kitchia needed a Mercedes G-Wagon to maintain her image as a model, I signed the lease because Tyrell's credit score was lower than the temperature outside. I was the ghost architect. I designed the buildings. Tyrell wore the suits and shook the hands. He got the magazine covers. I got the invoices. People often ask why I stayed. Why did a woman capable of designing 40-story skyscrapers let her family treat her like a servant? The answer lies in what psychologists call the boiling frog syndrome. If you drop a frog into a pot of boiling water, it will jump out immediately to save its life. But if you put that frog in tepid water and slowly turn up the heat, it will relax. It will float there, comfortable and unaware, as the temperature rises degree by degree, until it is boiled to death in its own pot. That was my life. It didn't start with kidnapping and million-dollar demands. It started with Kiara. Can you cover dinner? Then it was Kiara. Can you handle the car note just for this month? Then Kiara. We need a house befitting our status. The water got warmer every year, and I just kept adjusting, telling myself it was for family. I told myself I was the strong one, the provider. But looking at the red light on the door handle, I realized the water wasn't just warm anymore. It was boiling. And Tyrell had just slammed the lid shut. My computer screens were black, but the servers were humming underneath. They thought they had trapped a scared little sister. They forgot they had locked a master architect inside her own control room. I didn't need to ask why today was the day my brother decided to become a felon. The financials of KW Designs were etched into my mind more deeply than my own social security number. And as of 9 o'clock this morning, the firm's operating capital account was sitting at negative $300,000. Tyrell thought he was a visionary. 6 months ago, he had convinced himself that he could double our liquidity by leveraging the payroll account into a speculative cryptocurrency exchange. He didn't tell me, of course. He had forged my digital signature to bypass the two-factor authorization on the bank transfer. He thought he would make a quick fortune, pay back the principal, and keep the millions in profit to fund his lavish lifestyle without having to beg me for allowance. Instead, the market collapsed on Tuesday. The money, meant for salaries, software licenses, and the mortgage on this very penthouse, vanished into the digital ether. Now, the quarterly audit was scheduled for Monday morning. If the auditors looked at the books and saw the missing funds, Tyrell wouldn't just be broke. He would be indicted for corporate embezzlement. He was a rat trapped in a corner. And the only way out was the advance payment from the city contract. The city of Chicago pays a 10% mobilization fee upon signing a contract of this magnitude. 10% of $110 million is $11 million. That was enough to refill the operating account, bribe the auditors if necessary, and keep Tyrell playing the role of the big shot for another year. He didn't want the eco tower because he loved architecture. He couldn't tell a cantilever from a canopy. He wanted the eco tower because it was his get-out-of-jail-free card. A sharp tapping on the glass interrupted my calculations. Kichi was standing on the other side of the library door. She was wearing a silk robe that I had paid for. Holding a glass of cucumber water, she leaned in, her breath fogging the pristine glass, and offered a pitying smile that made my stomach turn. "You are being so dramatic, Kiara," she said, her voice muffled through the soundproof door but still dripping with condescension. "Just sign the paper so we can go to dinner. Tyrell promised to take me to Alinea tonight. And if we miss our reservation because you are throwing a tantrum, I am going to be very annoyed." I stared at her. She didn't care that her husband had just imprisoned his sister. She didn't care that he had stolen millions. She only cared that my resistance was an inconvenience to her Friday night plans. "It is just a signature, babe," she continued, tapping a manicured nail against the glass. "Don't be jealous just because Tyrell is the one making the big deals now. You should be proud to support him. That is what family does." She turned and walked away, flipping her hair over her shoulder. I looked back at the empty contract on my desk. They truly believed I was the obstacle. They thought my refusal was born of jealousy or pettiness. They had no idea that I wasn't holding on to the company to spite them. I was holding on to it because it was the only thing in this world that was truly mine. But as the sun began to set over the lake, casting long shadows across the library floor, I realized that protecting my creation was no longer enough. If I simply said no, they would keep me here. Or worse, Tyrell's desperation would turn violent. I needed to change the equation. I needed to stop acting like the sister who fixed things, and start acting like the architect who demolished them. Night fell over Chicago, turning the floor-to-ceiling windows of the library into vast, black mirrors reflecting my own isolation. The temperature in the room began to drop. Tyrell had adjusted the smart thermostat from his phone, cutting the heat to the library zone to 55 degrees. It was a petty, physical reminder of who held the controls. My stomach cramped with hunger. Through the glass doors, the faint glow of the television in the living room mocked me. The muffled sounds of laughter and the clinking of silverware drifted through the barrier. They were eating the dinner I had paid for, drinking the wine I had cellared, while I sat in the dark, shivering in my own house. For hours, I had analyzed their behavior, looking for a crack in their conscience. I kept waiting for my father to intervene, or for Tyrell to realize that imprisoning his sister was a step too far even for him. But as the hours ticked by, the silence from the other side of the door remained unbroken. That was when the cold truth finally settled in my bones, chilling me far more than the air conditioning ever could. I realized I had been looking at this through the lens of family, expecting emotional logic. But Tyrell wasn't operating on emotion. In this house, cruelty had been normalized to the point of invisibility. Tyrell didn't see himself as a villain locking a princess in a tower. He saw himself as a manager dealing with a piece of insubordinate office equipment. When your printer jams, you don't plead with it. You hit it. You unplug it. You force it to comply. To him, I wasn't a human being with rights. I was a malfunctioning asset that needed a hard reset. This realization didn't break me. It clarified me. If they saw me as a machine, then I would operate like one. Machines don't have feelings. They don't have loyalty. And most importantly, machines do exactly what they are programmed to do, even if that programming leads to catastrophic failure. The server rack in the corner hummed softly, a blue beacon in the darkness. Inside those drives lived the Eco Tower project terabytes of structural analysis, wind load simulations, and material specs. It was my magnum opus, a design so complex that only 3 architects in the country could fully understand the physics behind it. Tyrell certainly couldn't. To him it was just a file, a commodity to be traded for prestige and a check. My eyes locked on the directory on my screen. There were multiple versions of the project. There was the working draft, the client presentation, and the master file. I stopped shivering. A cold calm washed over me, steadying my hands. Tyrell wanted the blueprints. He wanted the credit. He wanted to walk into City Hall tomorrow and claim he was the genius behind the most ambitious skyscraper in Chicago history. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking in the silence. "Okay, brother," I whispered to the empty room. "You want to be the architect? I'll let you be the architect." I wouldn't just give him the file. I would give him exactly what he deserved. I reached for the keyboard. It was time to stop fighting the current and start steering the ship into the iceberg. Waking the screens, the blue light washed over my face, illuminating the complex wireframe model of the Eco Tower rotating slowly on the center monitor. It was beautiful. It was a masterpiece of sustainable engineering. A structure designed to breathe with the wind and collect the rain. Deleting it was not the plan, nor was corrupting the hard drive. Tyrell would have expected that. He would have simply sued me for destruction of property. To destroy a man like Tyrell, you don't take away his prize. You give him a prize that explodes in his hands. Accessing the structural analysis submenu, I navigated deep into the core physics engine, past the aesthetic rendering layers that Tyrell loved to look at, down to the mathematical bones of the building. I scrolled to the load-bearing calculations for the 40th floor, the critical junction where the tower's unique twisting geometry transferred its weight to the central steel spine. The gravitation load coefficient was set to 1.0. Perfect equilibrium. I highlighted the number. My finger hovered over the keyboard. I didn't need to make a massive change. A collapsed building is obvious. A structurally unsound building is a lawsuit waiting to happen. I typed 0.995, a 0.5% variance. To the naked eye, the model looked identical. The rendered image remained flawless. Even a standard file review wouldn't catch it unless you manually cross-referenced the physics tables. But in the mandatory stress test simulation that the city planning board ran on every submission, that tiny mathematical gap would act like a fracture in a dam. Under simulated wind load, the math would fail. The virtual tower wouldn't just sway, it would buckle. I saved the file as eco-tower_final_submission.cad. Then, I stood up. It was time for my performance. I went to the bathroom attached to the library. I splashed cold water on my face, letting it drip down my shirt to look like tears. I messed up my ponytail, pulling a few strands loose to frame my face in chaotic exhaustion. I slumped my shoulders, practicing the posture of a beaten dog. I walked to the glass door and knocked feebly. It took 5 minutes for Tyrell to appear. He sauntered down the hallway, picking his teeth, clearly enjoying the power dynamic. He unlocked the biometric seal but didn't open the door fully. He just leaned against the frame, blocking my exit. "Ready to be a good girl?" he asked, smirking. "I can't take the cold anymore," I whispered, keeping my eyes on the floor. "I'll sign. Just let me out." "File first," Tyrell said, holding out a silver USB drive. "Then freedom. I need the full master package. No tricks. It's on the desktop," I said, gesturing to the screens. Tyrell pushed past me. He shoved the drive into my custom-built tower. He grabbed the mouse, his greasy fingers leaving smudges on my equipment. He opened the file. The 3D model loaded instantly, spinning in high definition. He zoomed in on the lobby, then the penthouse, admiring the glossy textures. He didn't check the math. He didn't check the load tables. He just looked at the pretty pictures. "Beautiful," he muttered. He dragged the file to his USB drive. The progress bar filled up. Green. Complete. He yanked the drive out and kissed it. Then, he turned to me. The look in his eyes was pure, unadulterated triumph. He reached out and patted my head, heavy and condescending. "See?" he said, chuckling. "Was that so hard? You just needed a little motivation." He stepped aside, waving his arm toward the hallway like a benevolent king granting a peasant passage. "Go get some leftovers from the fridge," he said. "But don't stay up too late. I might need you to iron my shirt for tomorrow." I walked past him, keeping my head down to hide the absolute zero in my eyes. He thought he was holding the keys to the kingdom. He didn't know he was holding a grenade with the pin already pulled. The sun rose over Lake Michigan, painting the penthouse in shades of gold that my family mistook for a prophecy of their wealth. I watched from the other side of the glass wall as Tyrell prepared for his coronation. He was wearing a custom navy suit that I had purchased for his 32nd birthday. It cost $5,000, silk-lined, perfectly tailored to hide the soft waistline of a man who had never done a day of manual labor in his life. Tyrell stood before the foyer mirror, fixing his tie like a surgeon preparing for battle. "Showtime," he whispered, switching on a live stream and slipping into his polished influencer voice. "Good morning, Chicago," he declared, heading for the private elevator. Off to City Hall to submit final blueprints for the Eco Tower. Years of sacrifice. But today, we changed the skyline. Every sacrifice he bragged about was mine. In the living room, Frank, Ruth, and Kichia watched the broadcast on the giant TV, already planning Maldives villas with money they didn't have. "Book it," Frank toasted. "The Walsh legacy is finally secure." Before leaving, Tyrell checked the lock on the glass room holding me hostage. "Sit tight, sis," he smirked. "Until that check clears, you're collateral." I watched the live stream as he arrived at City Hall. Tyrell basked in the cameras, announcing his brilliant design. My father cheered from the sofa. Dr. Aris, the chief city engineer, started the mandatory stress test. The digital tower rose cleanly until floor 40. The structure buckled, imploded, and flashed one brutal verdict. Catastrophic failure. Gross negligence. Silence fell. Ruth whispered. "Is that supposed to happen?" Dr. Aris confronted Tyrell and confirmed the blueprint was a death trap. Tyrell doubled down, claiming he was the architect. 2 officers stepped forward. "Then you're under arrest." Tyrell panicked, blaming me. but he had signed an affidavit claiming sole authorship. The handcuffs snapped shut. I closed the stream. Done. Moments later, 6 KW corporate security agents entered the penthouse. Frank blustered, but they cut him off. The unit was corporate property. Tyrell's arrest voided their access. They had 5 minutes to leave, no possessions allowed. My family begged me to fix it. I can't, I said. The showroom is closed. Security escorted them out with nothing but the clothes they wore. Their dynasty evaporated by lunch. Tyrell sat in jail with no lawyer. My parents checked into a motel, and I stood on the balcony, overlooking the skyline I had built. Finally free. Justice served.